Welcome to the Champion Within podcast, your go-to spot for unlocking a winning mindset. Whether you're an athlete chasing greatness, a parent cheering from the sidelines, a coach leading the charge, or an educator shaping young minds, this pod party is for you. Hey, if we haven't met before, I'm Kate McCauley, your pod party host, former educator turned mindset mentor. I get to meet people where they are and get them to where they want to go. Expect awesome guest conversations with athletes, some solo chats to level up, and always leave this pod party with quick, powerful strategies to help you and your crew push past limits, embrace challenges, and crush goals both on and off the field. Let's tap into the champion within, because greatness is just a mindset away. Welcome to the Champion Within podcast. I'm your host, Kate McCauley, and today I have a powerhouse guest with us, Dr. Toby Brooks. Toby is an athletic trainer, strength coach, currently a professor. He is a man that has earned not one, but 5 college degrees. He's worked with athletes at every level, from the NFL to minor league baseball, college, and high school. In this episode, Toby and I dive deep into purpose, personal growth, and the crucial role that community and coaching play in shaping lives, the power of mindset, and how our goals evolve over time. If you are a parent, a teacher, or a coach, or a young athlete, or someone who is just striving for more and you want to reach those goals, lean into your purpose, this conversation will inspire you. Let's get into it. You made a really great decision hanging out with me today. I am excited to share this guest with you. You know that I put it out into the podcast world to find unique guests that can share wisdom with all of my listeners. And then I go and do a little bit of stalking. I look at their Instagram. I read all of the info about them. I don't know everything about their life, so I learn as I chat with them, and you listen and learn all of the wisdom that they have to share. I think my guest, Toby, today is going to be dropping a lot of wisdom. You're going to want to lean in and listen to this one. Toby, how are you today? Thank you for joining us.
Doing great. Thanks for having me today, Kate.
I would love for you to tell our listeners a little bit about, first, where you're coming in from, and I guess where you are right now is where we will start, and then maybe we'll go backwards if that makes sense.
Yeah, joining you from Waco, Texas today. I'm the director of the Academy for Teaching and Learning here at Baylor University. I've been here since July. So it's a pretty marked pivot shift for me career-wise. I previously spent the last 14 years at Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center in Lubbock. So it's about 300 miles away. I've got college kids who are still there in Lubbock. The nest emptied, and then we quickly vacated said nest. So it's been a big transition for our family. Our youngest is now a freshman in college, but it's been a good one. This job allows me to interact with a lot of faculty members. I work a little bit with athletics, and it allows me to really kind of lean in to my purpose, which is to help other people find and pursue a purpose of their own.
I love that. That was in your bio, to help people find their purpose. How do you help people do that? So do people come to you confused, or do you hear them say something and you highlight it, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've spent the last 14 years working primarily with grad students who they kind of knew what they wanted to be growing up. And Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center is different from Texas Tech. Texas Tech is 45,000 students, a typical general academic campus, lots of research, lots of majors. The Health Sciences Center is much smaller. It's a separate institution. It's about 4,500 students, and I work specifically with athletic trainers, aspiring athletic trainers. So these were master's students. They knew what they wanted to be when they grew up, but there's a lot of variability within that field. Do they want to work in high school? Do they want to work in pro sports? Do they want to work in clinic outreach settings? Over the years, I found myself really enjoying those conversations when students would come into my office and they just really didn't know what they wanted. And for me, I spent a lot of years kind of searching through those various stages of athletic training. And at the time, it kind of stunk because I was kind of feeling my way through the dark. But in retrospect, I see the purposes of those seasons because I feel like I can speak with some experience and some authority to students who are considering the same. And so as I've gotten older and I've started working more with early career college professors who, again, they don't know if they want to lean in on the research side, or do they want to spend most of their efforts getting better in teaching or pursuing grants. And so lots of times those conversations aren't so much the broad gamut of what your purpose is, but you've already kind of decided a career track. Now, can we lean in and can we make sure that you're fulfilling your specific purpose that's coupled with your preparation and your experiences?
Yeah, I heard you say something that I want to pull apart a little bit. You said navigating through the dark. And I don't want people to miss that because I think a lot of us, myself included, at times have felt that we are navigating through the dark. Tell me about some of those times. I read in your journey through your bio that you were in a lot of different levels at the pro level, college level, and maybe even with your own children. I saw on your Instagram that they are involved in athletics as well. How at times did you find yourself navigating through the dark, and did you use mindset to help you?
Absolutely. The story I've told over the years that was probably the most impactful for me. I grew up in a small town, no athletic trainers, no medical personnel for that matter. And I love sport, but I quickly discovered that that wasn't going to be the way I was going to pay the bills. I pursued college basketball briefly, but really kind of gravitated towards sports medicine as a way to marry my love of sport and my love of medicine and science. And so my biggest aspirations were to work in the NFL or a major D1 school. And I pursued that over the years. My wife and I had 12 addresses our first 10 years of marriage. We just bounced around. I was pursuing degrees and experiences. And once I got my PhD, I really felt unfulfilled. I was teaching primarily, traveling every once in a while with football. And I just really felt that tug to get back in and serve student athletes. And selfishly, I wanted an impressive business card with an NFL team's logo on it. And so I ended up at at the time, FCS school, so kind of second tier school, with what I thought was an up and coming coaching staff. And a lot of times in professional and upper level college sports, if you can kind of become part of a prolific coach's team, they bring you along on the ride. And I so went to this school, not intending to be there forever, but hoping that it was a step on the road. I was on the road with football. I remember it clear as day. Daughter at the time was less than a year old. Wife stayed home. I get home, drop my bags by the door, kiss and greet wife and daughter, just exhausted, plop down on the couch. This is late Saturday night, I believe, maybe early Sunday. And my daughter pops up and walks over to me, and she hadn't ever walked. And I'm like, when did that happen? And my wife said, well, that happened while you were gone. And I just was crushed at that moment. I thought, how many of these firsts am I going to miss chasing my own selfish ambition? Athletic training, I know you've had some strength and conditioning coaches, kind of similar. The hours can be abysmal. The pay is not great, especially as you're kind of proving yourself in the early years of your career. And that's where I was at. I was working 70, 80 hours a week, making $35,000 a year. And I recognized that my family's suffering financially. They're suffering because I'm not here, and I need to make a change. And so from there, I actually worked in arena football for a little bit, probably the funnest job I ever had. I was in Florida, arena football 2 at the time. So the players they had day jobs. So my wife and daughter and I would go to the beach every morning because all the players couldn't get treatment or whatever.
That's pretty cool.
It was.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my last real hurrah with sport. It was, day in and day out doing healthcare. From there, I really moved hard towards the academic side. I still cover events and work with individual patients, but actually being embedded and traveling with the team, it was a fantastic season of my life. I loved it. Got to see awesome parts of the world that I never would have seen. But now I recognize that my role is to equip the next generation to do that.
I love that story. And it makes total sense when you were saying navigating through the dark. I heard you say it might have been early next morning coming in. It was probably late evening, early into those morning hours. And your little daughter, I can visualize that, her walking across. And I have 3 children of my own who are maybe a little bit younger, teenagers, one in college now. So I feel that to my core, missing those moments. I was a health and phys ed teacher for 20 years. And although my schedule aligned many times with their school day, I did feel that I missed a lot of things because of school events, and I wanted to be there for the students. And now the things that I'm doing in the corporate space and with students, it's ironic that you said that. When I first left education, I said, I'm not going to go into schools at all. I'm not going to do that at all, because my heart was broken in many ways from just some things that were happening in the education world, the space I was in. And, you end up where you're supposed to be. And now I'm back loving some student athletes, exactly the way you were saying, leaning into your purpose again. When you land in the next place and you find yourself in that moment of, I really feel that this is where I am meant to be, I'm helping others see their purpose. Was there a moment where you thought, just like that moment where your daughter was walking across the room and you said, oh, wow, I don't want to miss these things? Was there a moment similar where you thought, this is it for me? I'm helping people find their purpose.
Yeah, I wish I could say yes, because wouldn't that be wonderful if the light bulb just comes on? I just did this recently with my team. As I said, I got here in July, and we've been working through vision, mission, values individually and sharing that as not just an exercise for us personally to put that on paper, but to express it to one another. It's really a team building exercise to hear your colleagues talk about what they perceive as their mission, vision, values. But my purpose in life has gone through several different iterations. That's what I always tell my students. It's what I tell my team is this document's never done. You're always going to be encountering other folks, and you will brush up against new ideas, and you need to constantly be refining that. So for me, I think the moment of clarity where I said, that's it, that's my purpose. I was actually reading a book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. He was a prisoner in a Nazi war camp. He actually wrote the entire book, sewed it into the liner of his jacket, and that jacket was taken. He had to write the book twice, and it is a seminal work in psychology fields.
Oh, wow.
The field of logotherapy is actually birthed out of the work that he did. But towards the end of the book, actually, it's an added bonus on the new edition. He talks about how he had this exercise with his students, and he asked his students, "What would you say is my purpose?" He gave the students a few moments, and one of the students recited back that your purpose in life is to help others find meaning in theirs. And he broke down in that moment. He's like, that's what I wrote down almost word for word. And in that instant, I had two thoughts. I'm like, first of all, to be a teacher who was vulnerable and pour into my students enough that they would know me and be able to iterate that word for word without me saying it, that's the kind of relationship I want to build with my students. And then second of all, it clicked. Like, my purpose is to help others find and pursue their own. And that can take a lot of different shapes. That could be on a football field providing healthcare. That could be in my office counseling someone else. It could be on my podcast learning new stories from people that inspire me. So that happened a few years ago, but along the way there were evidences all around me that that's really what I needed to lean into most. You mentioned mindset. That was a concept I was totally unfamiliar with until probably 7 or 8 years ago in the work of Carol Dweck and how I had just been really kind of captive by that fixed mindset. And it kept me playing small. It made me not pursue big dreams. And to this day, still that fixed mindset is something I have to push back against and try to encounter that growth mindset, because all the people that I aspire to be like, they didn't care about losses along the way. They were pursuing the big victory at the end. And for me, that was really life-changing.
There is so much wisdom in there. And, I look for guests that will inspire my listeners, but every time I talk with people, I gain. When you said you have to be open to things evolving, and I may have your words off a little bit there, but that your purpose evolves along the way and that you should allow it to, something along those lines that you said, thank you for that. Because when I left my position as an educator, it was hard for me to do because I saw myself doing that through retirement. And, I come from a family tree of educators and I really look up to them and still do, of course. And now as I'm doing the work with mindfulness and different things, I have allowed myself to be open to let things evolve. I didn't do that in the beginning. I thought, this is what I'm going to do. And when I let myself do that and authentically show up as myself, my whole journey changed. I'm happier. And even today, I'm going to talk to an elementary school and I'm so excited about it. And I love that you said that because I needed that reminder. So thank you for saying that. Look at you helping me put my purpose out there. And
But
I thought,
isn't that true though? I mean, I get the same thing out of my podcast, and I don't know about you, but podcasting is such a long game, and it takes so long to build. And I mentioned this in my monthly or my weekly email. Like, you see these celebrity podcasters pop up, and they get millions of downloads, and it's just it can be so frustrating. The comparison game can rob you of all kinds of joy, and you're like, I've been studying how to be a podcaster pretty religiously for 2 straight years. I just dropped my 100th episode. If I listen to my first and my last, I know I've gotten better. I feel like the content is on point, but the numbers just, they aren't where I would want them to be. And you see a Travis Kelce or Hawk Tua girl or whoever, and they just burst on the scene and they've got this immediate success. And there's part of me that wants to just throw it away, just forget it, I'm done. And then we'll have an interaction with a guest who changes my life. I decided to pursue my MBA because of a guest that I had on my show. There have been others who opened doors for me. This job that I have today probably wouldn't have happened if I didn't have the podcast. So I have to kind of check myself and be like, we would love big numbers, but impact. I mean, if I'm aligned with my purpose is to help other people discover and pursue their own. That might be one person listening to a podcast. I would love for it to be 1 million, selfishly. Like, we all want that kind of connection. We want width, but sometimes it's depth. Sometimes it speaks to somebody in a way that no one else could have. And with your show, I'm sure same thing. There are people listening to you. And how great would it be if you said, hey, I'm going to go talk, and 40 people showed up? That'd be fantastic. But if we see downloads of 40, we're like, oh, that one was a dud. You know, so I just have to check myself often and recognize that service is part of it. Personal growth is part of it. And it's really been transformative for me. I don't know if you could say the same for your show.
I would agree. First, congratulations on 100 episodes. I know how hard that is to do that. I got into this podcasting gig as a host because I was on a podcast tour and I met so many amazing people. I was on top 1% shows. I was getting invited and I loved it. I too met a lot of people that had connections. It really gave me business growth. Every single show, people would say to me, why don't you have a podcast? And I would say, I don't feel like editing it and doing all of that crazy stuff. I have no clue how to do it. Finally, I, gave in. I want to say I was pushed a little bit. Maybe I just finally said, fine, I will do it. I've leaned in, learned growth, and I too am frustrated when I will click on it and say, this is such a great episode. So many people are going to love this. And I see 32 and I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? This should be like Jason Kelce, Meg Robbins level. And, my mom will text me, that was the best episode ever. I'm like, that's great, Mom. I love that you loved it. There are people who are my loyal listeners. And then I do have to remember, if there are 32 people in a room with me and one person hears something, and I know what you just said to me will have a ripple effect because the event that I'm going to do is for students that are in an area that need to know that they can unlock their potential and do great things. And to be quite honest, I have some corporate engagements that came from one person hearing something and one post that I put on LinkedIn. It was mind-blowing that I'm even going to do this. And I'm seeing massive growth with things I'm very grateful for. And I probably would not have gone to this elementary school unless someone else reached out to me. But I'm really glad that I did and that I'm allowing myself to be open to it because I am excited about it. Hearing you say that, and I know that some little kid sitting in that assembly is going to hear something. I may never see the ripple effects. You may never know, but the ripple effects are out there. It happened to me as a teacher that people have written emails, years later saying, Mrs. Porter, my maiden name, you inspired me to do this. And I would cry. So, and I'm not looking for that per se, but I have to remind myself, like you said, that even if it's one person that, but it is a lot of work. So congratulations on that 100 episode. Those of you who are not podcasters who are listening, just know we don't show up and say, bippity boppity boo, here's a episode for you. I just want to give you a shout out there.
Well,
and I have listened to your podcast. Like I said, I do some stalking and you have some great episodes. So we will drop the links for everyone to check out yours too. So let's go back to the work that you are doing. Do you have any tips? I heard you say also that you are an empty nester now, do you have two children? Am I correct on that? Do they play sports still or are they just in college?
Our daughter is a vocal performance major, so she's pursuing a career in opera. She was a volleyball and softball player up till junior high and then pivoted pretty hard into the arts. So she's into the musicals and opera and acting, those kinds of things. She was all-state in choir. So as a dad, like I had designs on her being a volleyball player or a basketball player, and she pursued her passions hard, and that's all I could ever ask. She's opened my eyes to an entirely different part of the world. The arts were not something I ever really pursued or appreciated. The fact that she's found excellence in that path really helped me grow as a human, not just as her dad.
It's so funny. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but my youngest son, he has a uniquely beautiful brain, and he too played a lot of different sports because I'm an athlete, my husband, my two older kids, and he finally said, Mom, I hate this, but he just wasn't into it, not competitive. And he does stage crew and he's very artistic. He's actually starting his own podcast, all kinds of different things.
Awesome.
So I also am not the arts type mom. And it's funny when I go to these things, I'm like, get it, Ryan, and I'm like, I got to take it down a notch because I don't think these people are not ready for me. But I tell him all the time, you better bring me to that red carpet. I promise I won't bring my, crazy energy, but that's amazing for your daughter. So keep going. I just had to jump in because that's similarity.
So she should graduate in May. And then our youngest is a freshman at Lubbock Christian University. He was all-state in baseball and opted not to pursue that in college. And that, I won't say it broke my heart. I wanted that for him because of things I had not pursued. As I said, that fixed mindset kept me from really going after what I really wanted in athletics. And I was so afraid of failing that I kind of quit trying. I wanted him to pursue sport with all his heart, and then when he was done, do other things. So it's funny because he has a co-ed, I don't know that they're co-ed, but it's rec league softball, and he's just loving it. He's playing sport for the joy of sport. I was never the crazy little league travel ball dad. We actually kept him out of travel ball as long as we possibly could. I spent a lot of years working in youth sport performance, and I just wanted my kids to learn to love to move. It's great to know how to swing a bat or throw a baseball, but I want you to play pickleball when you're 40. I want you to be able to go hiking and or whatever, just learn to love to move in the body that you've been given. And I feel like we've been successful in that. He plays pickleball pretty frequently. He plays this rec league softball. He lifts. It's been exciting to see him come into his own, and movement has become part of his identity, not just wrapped up in, I'm a baseball player. And I think that's healthy. And that's the most I can hope for out of both my kids is that they find passions and pursuits and they go at them as hard as they can. And I think that's what's happened with both of them. So I'm super proud, couldn't be prouder of what they've done, but more than that, the people that they are.
Toby, did you know that I needed you today? I don't know how the universe aligned us today, but somehow it happened. My oldest son is a freshman in college, and he was a phenomenal basketball player, an AAU player, the travel teams. And I too was the type of parent who knew he was good. I played at not D1, but I was a collegiate player. And I really wanted that for him and could see it at a young age. I stopped coaching him when he got to, a little bit older because I didn't want it to be mommy ball. Like sometimes you hear daddy ball. I wanted him to prove himself. And, people would just see him and say, wow, he has it. And he loved it. People would say, move him up an age group. And I, no, play with your friends, And when he, had a decision to make, I said, it opened so many doors for me. I say to people, I played here and now my coach is in the Hall of Fame. I just went to the dinner. I lived with my roommates up at Penn State, Maine. And, so he just said, Mom, I love the game. I'm going to play pickup and intramurals. And I was like, but what? And he would say to me, and so I said, well, maybe he'll just go to campus and he'll just, all summer. And I'm like, I'm not going to say anything. And then he came home. He's like, I have a night class because he commutes in the beginning, then he's gone. But he's like, I have a night class and I have 3 hours in between. So I'm playing at the courts. I'm just going to stay there. It doesn't make sense to, I said, oh, that's great. I didn't want to say anything. And I'm like, oh, maybe he's going to try out. He came home. He's like, the basketball players were there today. I said, oh, that's cool. He's like, yeah. He's like, I'm like, how were they? He's like, they're okay. And I thought he was going to say, I might get, and I said, so he's like, I'm not playing. And then finally I just let it go. And then he said to me last week, he's like, I'm so happy. And I was like, you know what? I gotta let this go. He is happy. And I was worried, is he going to find his people? And he is finding his people. Mm-hmm. He doesn't need to do the same thing that I'm doing, but there is a lot of pressure. I feel like it was from the people in the bleachers next to me, almost the other parents. And my daughter competes as a track runner. She loves it. 3-season track. She's at a cross country meet now. They get the whole day off from school, winter and spring. And she doesn't want to run in college. She's a good runner, average to good, but she doesn't want to run in college either. And I have shifted to say, Kylie, whatever you want to do, have fun, So thank you for reminding me again that I need to,
I needed to hear what you had to say as well. I think for me, the end game in sport was always to be recognized at the highest possible level. That was it. And part of that was probably rooted in some and this isn't a therapy session, but rooted in insecurity. I needed the outside affirmation that I was good enough as an athlete, that someone would want me, and they would want me enough to bring me to their school and put me on their bench, or heaven forbid, put me on their floor. And so much about that, now that I'm older and I've kind of sorted through it, is rooted in the wrong mentality. And you mentioned something about identity. For me, I was a basketball player, and the only way I could feed that identity was outside confirmation of what I hoped and prayed that I was as a player. And when I didn't get it, it crushed me. And when that career, air quotes, career was over, I was lost. I was searching for what's next. If there's nowhere for me to play, then the next best thing I could find was sports medicine, and being an athletic trainer would hopefully be a substitute drug for what sport had been all my life. But what I'm hearing you say, and what I've come to terms with myself, is our kids had it right. I had it wrong. His identity wasn't wrapped up in who he was as a baseball player. His identity was wrapped up in who he was as a believer in Christ, who he is as a friend, the kind of son, the kind of leader that he can be on his campus. And those are sustainable things. I don't know any 90-year-olds who are still playing in competitive baseball leagues, but I know 90-year-olds who are still leaders and inspirational. And it's like, you've taught me so much. He's kind of living the life post-sport that I wish I would have. I spent more years than I care to admit lamenting the loss of playing. And he's just celebrating what happened. He's thankful for the experiences that he had. And I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. But it was telling for me, and it was instructive for me to see how he navigated the end of his playing career, because it was inspiring. And I don't worry about him spiraling into depression like I did, because he left it on the field and he walked away, and he's proud of that. And what more could you ask for as a dad?
Yeah. We need to thank them. I'm going to thank your son here. I'm going to make it weird for my kids and probably give them a hug later. They're going to be like, seriously, stop making it awkward. But I I really think that we need to thank them. We learn so much from them. And I think sometimes my daughter tells me a lot, let the baby birds out of the nest, especially for my youngest guy. And I do try to do that as an educator. I know, but it's hard sometimes as the mom, dad figure in that situation. But it's interesting how that happens, but pretty cool journey. So best of luck to both of them. It sounds like they have it figured out in many ways and are open to letting things evolve as they're supposed to. So good job to you and your wife for instilling that. Hey there, before we dive back into the pod party, how about we sneak out for a quick break? Feeling the weight of the daily grind? Our workshops and staff development programs are your backstage pass to success. We're here to arm you and your leadership squad with the tools to ace those goals, tame stress, and foster a winning culture. Forget the boring seminars. Our workshops are all about real connections and real results. Whether it's virtual or in person, we're here to elevate your success. After the show, visit shop.danunow.com to learn more and set up a free call to chat. We tailor our programs to fit your needs and goals. Let's get back to the show. Grab your virtual goodie bags so you can fill them up with all of the mindset magic. Do you have any tips? I feel like you're a few steps ahead of me and probably some of the people that I work with right now as far as teams and their parents. I have a village mentality and I invite the parents to come simply to tell them, this is the language that I'm sharing with them. I know that teenagers don't always talk to their parents, but they will listen to another voice. I also know that when you have the same language or you all are on the same team, so to speak, as an educator, I know this as a coach, that your child will succeed in the classroom, in their sport, with goals in life in general. Do you have any tips or maybe words of advice, mindset that you would give to a parent if you were, in those shoes, maybe at that high school level?
Yeah, so our son in particular, he played JV, actually freshman baseball as a freshman. We were at a 5A public school at the time, and they had over 100 kids try out for the freshman baseball team. He made it. It was not the kind of season he had hoped. He didn't get to play as much as he would have wanted to. I think that's safe to say. And he suffered an injury along the way, ends up having surgery between his freshman and sophomore years. And so at that school, specialization was really kind of the order of the day. If you were going to play baseball, play baseball. If you're going to play basketball, play basketball. He wanted to do band. He wanted to do baseball. The schedule didn't allow it. And so we're going through that fall of his sophomore year, and he's trying to recover from injury. He's got coaches that they've got so many kids. This isn't a criticism of the coaches, but if you've got 100 potential kids on your roster and one kid kind of fades away, that's one fewer kid you have to cut. So I don't blame them, but I felt like he was just getting lost in the shuffle. He was not, 6'9" lefty that's throwing 100-mile-an-hour heat. But I knew that over time he could develop into a great baseball player once he recovered from this injury. So we made the decision to transfer him to a private school. And the message here, the lesson that I would say is, whether it's private school, whether it's public school, whatever, there are lessons that I wanted my kids to learn that I knew they wouldn't learn from me. They wouldn't listen to me because I was dad. So in that instance, you can either just allow the environment to sprout around your kids, or you can do your best to put them in the path of people that align with your values. And I would say beyond that, the lessons my son learned from his head football coach, athletic director, Chris Softly, he has built a culture that they won. They're the back-to-back Henderson Cup champions in Texas, which is basically it's almost like what the Learfield Cup is for college. It's like all sports, all band, arts, all those things. The school that accrues the most points gets the Henderson Cup. So they've won it back-to-back years. So the culture there is, we want kids to play in any sport that they can. We're going to share. We want them to build community. They have a weight room. They do strength and conditioning every day basically PE the way PE should have been. And so I saw his body change. it became cultural because he recognized that pursuing these life lessons that were being taught by Coach Softly and his staff was woven into the workouts. I mean, they would talk about scripture and then go do a lift, and they would talk about how pain and your quads are on fire, and you're ruminating about a verse about how we endure pain. And so what I saw with that was he was listening and learning and growing from someone else's voice in a way that he never would have from me. And it's not that we had a bad relationship, but there's just something about another's gravity. I don't know a better word, but an outside coach, a teacher, an influence can pour into our kids in a way that we never could. I'm thankful. I mean, I would love to take credit for it and say, I knew exactly how this was all going to work out, that Coach Softly was going to change his life, or that Coach Terry was going to change his life. I didn't know that, but in retrospect, I'm so thankful for that community and that culture of excellence that was built there.
Yeah.
And if you want to keep a kid in public school, that's okay. But, picking the team that they play for and the coach is speaking into them, it's not always about scholarships. It's not about who's going to open the most opportunities for your kid to be seen by others. Be purposeful about the culture.
Yeah.
What's the lesson that I want my kid to learn from me that they might not hear, and who's most likely to deliver that to them? And that's the team, that's the organization I want to try to channel my kid toward.
Yeah. So I'm getting emotional on my end because I'm thinking of the 3 people that did that for my kids, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for them. So yeah, that's amazing. I might need to have that coach on my podcast because that school, I do sometimes on my podcast, I do what I call panel discussions, and it's a great conversation. And I would love to hear what that school is doing. I'm here in the Philadelphia area. I have never heard of an award like that, or I have heard of schools, private schools mostly, saying, we want you to do something every season. But I've never really heard of them. How do we figure out if they do it, or, how do we reward it, so to speak? And how do we encourage it, and those life lessons that you learn from it? And like you said, the words that they're pouring into their brain, how incredibly valuable. And, I'm just going to give a shout out right now to the coach for my daughter would definitely be her track coach, Coach Boyle, who his kids are sometimes at the winter and spring track. And she even loves just working with them. She wants to be a teacher, and the ones I think she's in first grade now. The things that he has done for her as an athlete and just a human, I'm so grateful for. And then my youngest with stage crew, I am so grateful. But this year, she happens to be his language arts teacher as well in 8th grade. How lucky are we that he has this woman pouring into his brain, not only in the area of arts, but also in the classroom. And for my son, there was definitely some coaches along the way. I was a teacher at the high school level. There was a coach in the local area, and he was a student at the high school that I taught at. I never taught him, but he would come back and work with the current students. He is a very successful coach. He takes kids who are D1 players. They go into the NBA. He would come on Sundays to the gym, and he would work with 6th, 7th, 8th graders, kids who just wanted extra training. And I needed my son to have a different voice than all of the same dads who were coaching around here. Nothing against those dads. If you're listening to my podcast, I love you too that you volunteered. But this coach, Coach Kev, his voice really sunk into my son, and he kept it real. And he told him, push yourself. And it was a different voice. So that's why I was getting emotional. I was having flashbacks thinking about, could you say the coach's name again for your son?
Chris Softly. And actually my son texted me this week. He said, hey, I'm going to a Bible study at Coach Softly's. And my son's a freshman in college. Coach Softly is a high school football and athletic director. And we're like, what are you talking about? He said he does a weekly Bible study for college kids. He has no obligation to them whatsoever. He just has them over to the house. It's a time of fellowship. They feed them. I mean, he's continuing to pour in to student athletes that he had. Some of them graduated 3 years ago, but he still has this impact in their life. And
all right, I'm just going to say it right now. Coach Softly, if you listen to this episode with Toby and I, please come on my podcast because I need to hear about this. What an amazing human. Thank you for sharing that story with us. I don't want to keep you here forever. I know you are incredibly busy. We could talk about so many things. I may have to have you back on because I know you have books and different things out into the universe that I'm sure I could do a whole series with all of the things that you've done. Plus, I don't think I should keep crying on the podcast here, although I probably needed it. So thank you for all of that. But thank you. I do ask all of my guests at the end of our chat, if you had the opportunity to swap lives with someone, and it's only for 1 week because we do think you're amazing, who would you be choosing and why?
That's a great question. And I saw it and I really struggled with it because there were a lot of people who have had an impact in my life. Honestly, I really think I don't have a specific answer for that. And I'm going to cheat a little bit and say, I would just like to experience life, whether it's from a woman's perspective, from a person of color's perspective, because I grew up in a relatively poor area, small school, and the notion of privilege always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. When people in particular talked about white privilege, I would think, well, there's not a lot of privilege where I'm at. Like, I'm a first generation college student, worked my way through, you kind of scrap and claw and earn things. And it took me longer than I care to admit to recognize that privilege isn't always talking about finance. Sometimes it's just talking about, I was listening to a podcast today about Woodstock 99. And I don't know if you remember anything about that up in New York, but the episode today in particular was talking about the show from the perspective of women who were oftentimes, just horrible things done.
Right.
And it's nothing for me to step out the door if I want to go for a run at 2 a.m., I go for a run at 2 a.m. And I have a colleague at the place I used to work. She's like, wow, what must that be like? And I thought, what do you mean? She's like, well, I could never go on a run at 2 a.m. So I don't have a specific answer for you, but I would say that I love the thought or the idea of gaining the perspective of how other people view the world, because we all come at this with our own kind of narrow viewpoint. I'm coming at this, straight white male. That means something different than a person of color or a woman's perspective. And I feel like that would help me treat people better. And to circle it back to my purpose, if I try to reach out to you to help you discover and pursue a purpose of your own, but I'm just looking at it through my eyes, I can't do a good job at that. And so the perspective that would be gained from living in your shoes for a week would be tremendous. Living in the shoes of a student or a colleague. So that's a very political, non-committal answer to that. But I couldn't think of a specific person that would fit or check all those boxes for me.
It's a tough question. And I love that answer. I connect with it in many ways. And the part about going out for a run, I know what your colleague is talking about. I try to get outside, run, walk I love getting outside if I can get a workout in at some point. I will go at night, but I will only have one AirPod in because I need to hear what is around me. And my husband and my oldest son will say, what? And I have to explain it to them. Then they say, oh my, they start to get worried for me. And my daughter says, come on, guys, of course, as a runner, it's just a different viewpoint of the world. I think it's a cool answer. I like it. I think it's a great answer. And anyone who's listening right now, just take a moment and think about what would it be like if I was living life in their shoes. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners? Definitely drop Instagram or any handles where people can follow you and your podcast.
Yeah, probably the easiest way is just go to Linktree, Linktr.ee /TobyJBrooks. All my socials are on there. It's kind of a one-stop shop. But the podcast is called Becoming Undone. I typically release new episodes every Thursday. I took a little bit of a break. I had the honor of interviewing lifelong childhood friend Larry Johnson. I did a multi-part documentary on his life, Grandmama, for the older folks that remember that era. But I'll be back to doing episodes starting back next week. I just want to encourage you. I know this can be a lonely journey. It can be a discouraging journey at times. It can be an exhilarating journey at times. But for me, just leaning into the regularity of it and understanding this is a long game.
Yeah.
I had some serious pod fade at about 6 months and kind of just stopped. But once I kind of got the momentum going, it's just like anything. It's habit, right? So if you've got a good workflow, keep it up because weeds want to sprout. And if I can, I was purposeful. 2 weeks off and I'm back at it because it's too easy to let 2 weeks turn into 2 months, turn into never again. So
very true. I had that thought pop in recently. I was thinking, okay, a lot of people are reaching out on Instagram and LinkedIn. Do I need to keep doing the podcast? And then I had 2 people reach out saying, I heard your episode on this. And I said, I guess I'm going to keep doing the podcast. And then honestly, Toby, I'm chatting with you today and I just needed to do that. And I will admit during the summer, I did make it easy for myself, and who knows if that was good for the podcast, but the kids were home and I decided I'm not bringing guests on. So I do like the fact that I can do what I want with this podcast, and I'm going to continue to do that. But I do think it's important for me to remember that it is a long game. Thank you for that reminder, because I started, I guess my first episodes were March. I'm a newbie in this still and figuring it out as I go. And I'm going to stay open to letting it evolve.
Yeah, so, well, love your work.
Thank you.
If there's anything I can do to support you along the way, like-minded folks have to lock arms, and
I appreciate
sometimes that. We need some experience from some people that have been through the wars, so to speak.
I appreciate that more than you know. Thank you for that. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I will definitely drop all of those links in there. And those of you who are listening, I'm sure that you are going to want to go follow, listen to Toby's podcast. I know that we will be getting some messages about all of that. They'll probably be asking me to share the clips. Did you actually cry? And I thank you again for helping me realize what my purpose was.
Same here. I got more out of this than you did, so I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for saying that. All right, everyone, thank you for tapping in today and putting those earbuds in, whether you're driving, taking a walk. We appreciate you hanging out with us on The Champion Within. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Whether you are going to coach, teach, cheer from the stands, or hit the field yourself, remember, mindset is everything. Don't forget to follow the show because we all need a little extra motivation, humor, and some sanity in our busy lives. Go unleash that champion within you, one step at a time. I'm rooting for you always.